Yes.
Madam Secretary General.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It's you again. But we are glad to have you.
Thank you. It's nice to see you. Ladies and gentlemen, the sitting is open. I declare open the 2022 ordinary session of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. Dear colleagues, it's good to address you again in this hemicycle, not remotely, even if the hemicycle is still quite empty. Our Assembly faced serious difficulties in organizing its work under the conditions of pandemic, and I would like to praise our Secretariat and the entire staff who cope quite well with the numerous problems. However, we should not concentrate on internal issues. We ought to fulfill our mission despite all hurdles. In the last year, we faced new challenges to democracy, human rights, and rule of law in Europe. We cannot stay indifferent to rigged elections, brutal suppression of peaceful protests, mass repressions against civil society and independent media in any of our member states. But even when such violations occur in a state that is not a member of our organization, the Council of Europe must find a proper response to the crisis of democracy, in particular in Belarus. Ladies and gentlemen, it is easy to support lofty values when it costs nothing. This is not the case with, in particular, the new refugee crisis. We witness new developments when not only criminal smugglers, but some European states are behind organizing irregular immigration. We must ensure the security of our borders, but at the same time, we cannot ignore our humanitarian obligations. Violators of human rights use individuals as just a policy tool, but we cannot do the same. The right to asylum is a crucial human right, and democracies must respect and uphold it, even under difficult circumstances. International cooperation is key in this respect. It is revealing that exactly those states which have been reluctant to engage in international solidarity and burden sharing some years ago now themselves face similar problems. This is a good lesson for all of us. We must work together to cope with new challenges. Ladies and gentlemen, the pandemic keeps posing new problems. 1 year ago, our Assembly adopted Resolution 2361 on ethical, legal, and practical considerations of COVID-19 vaccines, which stated that vaccination must not be mandatory and that no one should be under pressure to be vaccinated if they do not wish to do so. This resolution now is the most widely cited document of our Assembly. However, I am not happy about it at all, as it is mostly referred to by COVID deniers and anti-vaxxers. When we voted for that resolution, vaccines were not yet available. And we clearly underestimated the level of prejudice, superstitions, mistrust of governments and science in our societies. We could not imagine that so many populist politicians would misuse human rights rhetoric to oppose restrictions necessary to save human lives. Those who defend human rights defend individual choices against rules imposed by states. However, when it comes to vaccination and other measures of protection against the pandemic, it is not black and white. Democracies can and even must protect people from the risks to their life and health caused by irresponsible behavior of others. Individuals' free choice is limited by the rights of other individuals. Now we see that more and more democracies introduce restrictive measures to ensure effective fight against the pandemic. Many cases are already before the courts at different levels. Some have already been decided, and we are now awaiting the Strasbourg Court's judgments to put all dots above I's. It is proposed that during this session we will have a debate on this and other very topical issues. Ladies and gentlemen, Our Assembly can and must play a crucial role in facing these and many other topical challenges. Let's be responsible and think not only about coming elections, but first about the rights and well-being of Europeans who elected us. Dear colleagues, I propose we observe a minute of silence in memory of David Sasoli, President of the European Parliament, who passed away on 11th January. David Sasoli was a committed European and the most dedicated and tireless defender of human rights and democracy, with an unwavering faith in the common values that animate the European Union and the Council of Europe. Mr. Sasoli was a dear friend of the Parliamentary Assembly. We will remember his stirring speech to our Assembly at the April 2021 part session, in which he called for strengthened cooperation between our two institutions to uphold respect for human rights and democratic principles for the benefit of all European citizens. So, thank you. And let's take up our agenda. The first item on the agenda is the examination of credentials of members for the 2022 ordinary session of the Assembly. According to Rule 67.4, the deadline for submission of the credentials of the members of the Assembly was midnight on Monday, 17th January. The names of the representatives and substitutes are in document 15441. If no credentials are challenged, the credentials will be ratified. Are any credentials challenged? If so, please ask for the floor by raising your hand for those present in the chamber, or request the floor in the remote system. I see Mr. Zingeris is asking for the floor. Before calling a member to speak at this point, I remind the Assembly that the rules on challenges to credentials require the member challenging credentials to state, first, which credentials are being challenged, second, whether the challenges under Rule 7, procedural grounds, or Rule 8, substantive grounds, and the reasons for the challenge. So, Mr. Zingeris, please, you have the floor.
So much. Dear Boris, thank you so much, and dear Secretary General. I challenge the credentials of the Russian delegation on substantive grounds. Previous parliamentary elections in Russia were not free and not fair, so the Russian delegation is not legitimate. Russia is not implementing resolutions 1990, 2034, 2063, 2363, and 2387, occupying Ukrainian and Georgia territories. Recently, Russia has liquidated an internationally recognized memorial human rights center. Russian government poisoned and imprisoned opposition activist Navalny. Russia failure to cooperate with rapporteurs, non-implementing the human rights decisions are reason to make a challenge for substantial grounds. And the recent militarization.
Thank you. Thank you. So Mr. Zingeris is challenging the credentials of the delegation of the Russian Federation on substantive grounds under Rule 8 of the Assembly's Rules of Procedure. Under Rule 8, your challenge must be supported by at least 30 members from at least 5 national delegations. I will invite those who support this challenge to indicate their support using the available voting system. Members present in the chamber should stand in their place and simultaneously use the voting system of the hemicycle by voting yes. Members who do not support the challenge shall not stand or vote at all. Members participating remotely should vote using the remote voting system. Those who support this challenge will vote yes. Those who do not support the challenge shall not vote at all. Now is the vote in the Kudo system prepared? Can we open the vote? So the vote in the hemicycle and via remote voting is now open. Yes? Please stand up and also vote yes in the hemicycle voting system. Colleagues, let me remind that it is not enough just to stand up, but please vote yes in your voting system in the hemicycle. I hope it's... Okay. Can we close the vote?
Wait a little bit, we are
Yeah.
receiving votes.
Here. So there is a complaint that the voting system in the hemicycle doesn't work.
Just for Mr. Zinger.
Oh, only for okay. But you should put your card inside in order
It's
to
not
make it.
working.
Yeah.
Only about me, not about them. Yes.
Okay. Sorry about
trust
you.
you.
He needs another badge, he knows, Mr. Zinger. It's a problem.
Oh, yes. So I am informed that it's the fault is not with you, but with your badge. You have to replace your badge because the one it's
But
outdated.
please calculate
already.
that.
Okay. I hope it's not a problem to add your vote to the total number.
Can we close?
Now I close the vote, and I now ask for the results to be displayed. Okay, so this is a technical complaint, but let's first have a look at the results. It's not a decisive vote. We just need to know whether this challenge is supported by 30 people. So let's have the results and then proceed further. We have the results, so apparently the challenge has the support required under the rules of procedure. And the credentials of the Russian delegation are referred without debate to the appropriate committee and to the Committee on the Rules of Procedure, Immunities and Institutional Affairs for opinion. The appropriate committee in this case is the monitoring committee. The committee shall report within 24 hours if possible. Does the Assembly agree? So this is what the rules prescribe very clearly. Thank you. It is agreed to. Accordingly, the credentials of the Russian delegation are referred to the Monitoring Committee for report and to the Committee on Rules and Procedures for opinion. I propose that this debate take place on Wednesday afternoon as the first item of business. I remind you that members of a national delegation whose credentials are challenged may sit provisionally with the same right as other Assembly members until the Assembly has reached a decision. However, those members shall not vote in any proceedings relating to the examination of credentials which concern them. Are there any other challenges? Yes, please, Madam Kravchuk. Yeah?
Thank you, Mr. President. I challenge the credentials of the Russian delegation on procedural grounds under Rule 7. The election of parliamentarians from nationwide party lists in Russia includes votes from the illegally occupied and annexed territory of Crimea. I recall to the Venice Commission's opinion on the inclusion of a not internationally recognized territory into a nationwide constituency for parliamentary elections, which points out that the organization of elections in the annexed territory does not and cannot remedy the annexation. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam. So Madam Kravchuk is challenging the credentials of the delegation of the Russian Federation on procedural grounds. Under Rule 7 of the Assembly, the rules of procedure. I remind the Assembly that under Rule 7, a challenge must be supported by at least 10 members from at least 5 national delegations. I will invite those who support this challenge to indicate their support using the available voting system. Members present in the chamber should stand in their place and use the voting system of the hemicycle by voting yes. Members who do not support the challenge shall not vote at all. Members participating remotely should vote using the remote voting system. Those who support the challenge will vote yes. Those who do not support the challenge shall not vote at all. Now the vote in the hemicycle and via remote voting is open. Please, those who support the challenge, please stand up and also vote. Maybe in this case we can save some time. I see more than 10 members are already standing. I have to consult with the Secretariat. Will it be against the rules if we accept this challenge?
We need to have the vote now.
Okay, so please stand up for a while and vote. And please keep voting in CUDA too. So let's have this procedure in full accordance with the formal rules. Yeah.
We can close it.
The vote is closed. Please sit down. And I call for the results to be displayed. Yes. Yes, it seems, yes, the challenge has certainly the support required by the rules of procedure. Accordingly, the credentials of the Russian delegation are referred without debate to the Committee on Rules of Procedure, Immunities and Institutional Affairs. The committee shall report within 24 hours, if possible. I will make a proposal on the timing for debating this report when we come to consider the adoption of the agenda. Probably also Wednesday afternoon, but let's double check this. Again, I remind you that the members whose credentials are challenged may sit provisionally with the same rights as other Assembly members until the Assembly has reached a decision. However, those members shall not vote in any proceedings relating to the examination of credentials which concern them. Are there any other challenges? I see none, no requests in CUDA. So the other credentials set out in document 15441 are ratified, and I welcome our new colleagues. The next item on the agenda is the election of the President of the Assembly. I have received 2 candidatures, that of Mr. Tini Cox from Netherlands, chairperson of the United European Left Group, and Mrs. Maria Mezentseva, chairperson of the Ukrainian delegation, member of the EPP CD group. The list of candidates and supporting signatures can be found in document ASIN 2022-03. In accordance with Rule 15, the President shall be elected by secret ballot. The vote will be conducted using the electronic voting system on the Skytle, how we pronounce it correctly, platform. I remind you that you will use your private email address. If you experience technical problems, please follow the instructions provided in the guidance of the Assembly Session Special webpage. 5 tellers represented each political group will help oversee the election and counting, assisting by the Secretariat. The tellers are Mr. Volker Ulrich from EPP CD Group, Madame Sayek Baquet from Socialist Group, I guess Mr. Howell from the EC Group, Mrs. Beatrice Fresco-Rolfo from ALDE Group, and Mr. Hisyar Osoy from United Left Group. If neither candidate obtains an absolute majority of the votes cast at the first ballot, there will be a second ballot in which a relative majority will be required. Now we move to the election of the president. The voting will be open for 1.5 hours and will close at 12:30, after which the votes will be checked and verified. The sitting will resume at 1:30 p.m. for the announcement of the results and to conclude the other items of business for the first sitting, as set out in the draft agenda you received. Before suspending the sitting, I must inform those members who are remotely connected that the CUDO link for this part of the sitting remains the same, unchanged, for the resumption of the sitting at 1:30 p.m. I hope everything is clear. We have enough time to cope with all potential difficulties with the voting system. And now the sitting is suspended. Thank you. So, dear colleagues, the sitting is resumed, and I will now announce the results for the election for the President of the Assembly as in the protocol signed by the tellers, which is...
It is coming.
Yeah, the protocol is coming. But in the meantime, can I announce the results now orally?
Please wait.
Okay, let's wait while we have the protocol in our hands.
Here it is.
Yeah, here it is. So I can just read from the protocol, which is signed by all tellers. So the total number of members voting is 249. Spoiled or blank ballots, bulletins, 5. So valid votes cast is 244. Votes for absolute majority necessary 123. The votes were cast as follows. Mr. Tini Cox, 164. Mrs. Maria Mezentsova, 80. So Mr. Cox, having obtained an absolute majority of votes cast, is elected President of the Parliamentary Assembly of the Council of Europe. So, Mr. Cox, I congratulate you on your election, and please take your seat.
Thank you very much.
Merci beaucoup, cher Boris, et mesdames, messieurs, chers collègues. Est-ce que je peux vous remercier vivement de m'accorder le grand honneur d'être votre nouveau président de notre Assemblée parlementaire du Conseil de l'Europe? Est-ce que je peux remercier les membres de la délégation néerlandaise et ceux du groupe pour la gauche unitaire européenne, ainsi que tous les autres membres qui m'ont aidé à me porter candidate à ce poste prestigieux sur la base de l'accord entre les groupes politiques dans cette Assemblée. Est-ce que je peux également remercier la secrétaire générale de notre Assemblée pour ses précieux conseils lors du processus de nomination. Chers collègues, sachant que Despina et son personnel plus dévoué et hautement qualifié sont toujours présents, il est tellement plus facile d'accepter ce défi de présider notre Assemblée estimée. Despina, je compte sur vous et votre équipe. Et puis, j'ai profité de cette occasion de rendre hommage sincère à mon prédécesseur, le président Rick Daams, pour son leadership solide au cours des 2 dernières années difficiles. Tu as fait un grand travail, cher Rick. Chapeau, hoed af, meneer de president. Comme on dit dans ta et ma langue maternelle. Dear colleagues, changing the presidency does not mean changing the course that this Assembly has chosen in the recent past, not at all. By adopting last year's resolution on the Assembly's vision on the strategic priorities for the Council of Europe, we have already set our clear agenda for the next years. And I promise that I will do my utmost to realize that agenda. As a statute of the Council of Europe states in its Article 1, it is our common obligation to help, and I quote, to achieve greater unity between our member states for the purpose of safeguarding and realizing the ideals and principles which are our common heritage and facilitating our economic and social progress, end of quote. Last year, dear colleagues, this Assembly stipulated that the Council of Europe's overall priority is to remain the pillar of democratic security, the guarantor of human rights and the rule of law, as well as a platform for effective multilateralism in Europe, and to preserve and to reaffirm our own identity as an independent forum for a comprehensive and inclusive political dialogue and cooperation. To realize our agenda, we need synergy between our activities and those of the Committee of Ministers, the Secretary General, and the Council of Europe's Human Rights Commissioner. All alone, colleagues, we tend to be rather weak. Together, we could show the strength one might expect from Europe's oldest and broadest treaty-based organization, which involves citizens from Reykjavik to Vladivostok and from the North Pole to the Mediterranean Sea. I am eagerly looking forward to represent our Assembly in meetings with the representatives of all parts of the organization. I will sincerely invest in a fruitful trialogue with our Secretary General and the Chair of the Committee of Ministers. I also reach out to our Council of Europe Congress of local and regional authorities, which is now presided by my countryman and good friend Leen Verbeek. Human rights must remain, as we decided last year, at the very core of the Council of Europe's strategic framework, with the implementation of the Convention in all Member States as our top priority. To achieve this, dear colleagues, ongoing and in-depth dialogue in and with all Member States and Member Parliaments is absolutely needed, because only then we can uphold the authority of the European Court of Human Rights by all Member States and by the Council of Europe as a whole. Accession of the European Union to the Convention is also declared by our Assembly as a strategic priority, as well as putting a stronger emphasis on the protection of social and economic rights and promoting signing and ratification of the European Social Charter by all Member States and by the European Union. I'm looking forward to work together with the newly elected President of the European Parliament, Madam Roberta Metsola, who I congratulate with her election last week, also here in Strasbourg. I hope to meet her soon. And dear colleagues, may I use this opportunity to pay my sincere condolences to the family and friends of former President David Sasoli, who passed away recently. To champion equality and elimination of discrimination on any grounds is one of the priorities of our Assembly, as we decided. This includes promoting the ratification and the effective implementation of the groundbreaking standards and tools of our Convention on preventing and combating violence against women and domestic violence. Our support for including the right to a safe, healthy and sustainable environment in the legal framework of its fundamental rights guaranteed by our Convention is also at the top of our agenda. Here we could and should be leading in setting clear standards for Europe if we join forces with the Committee of Ministers and with our national parliaments. Especially young citizens of Europe are demanding us to take decisive action. Everyone's right to life can only be protected by our Convention if and as long as such a life is livable. The need for democratic governance of artificial intelligence will also stay one of our priorities. We all make ever more use of these often magnificent technologies. But let us care, dear colleagues, that in the end, we, citizens, will not be used by known and unknown powers behind these technologies. As we emphasized last year, support to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations needs priority of our Assembly on our Assembly agenda. Therefore, our Assembly needs concrete cooperation with Member States and international organizations. I will reach out to them as our President Rick Daems did. Fighting corruption, money laundering, terrorism and violent extremism, which all destabilize our societies, have also been put on our priorities, as well as fighting social inequality. Our convention-based system of the Council of Europe offers us plenty of mechanisms and tools to put these priorities into practice. Dear colleagues, This assembly is unique in Europe and unique in the world. Our governments have granted us, parliamentarians of 47 member states, real powers. The right to elect the judges to the Court of Human Rights, the right to elect the Secretary General of the Council of Europe and our Human Rights Commissioner, the right to adopt resolutions and to give clear recommendations to the Committee of Ministers. And most recently, the right to act together with the Committee of Ministers to effectively address a blatant violation by any member state of its obligations under the statute. Dear colleagues, besides these real powers, we are, when we act at our best, the political engine of the Council of Europe. Like it was in 1949, when our first president, Paul-Henri Spaak, called the start of our Assembly's activities, and I quote, d'une importance capitale pour l'histoire de l'Europe et une étape décisive aux directions d'une unité européenne, end of quote. Since then, dear colleagues, it was here where main conventions are born, from the Convention on Human Rights to the Istanbul Convention to protect women from violence. It is here where inspiring debates start on the essence of human rights, the need to protect and develop the rule of law and the indispensability of democratic standards and practices in all our member states. It is here where elected politicians from everywhere in Europe have the possibility to participate in a unique pan-European agora, which is the ancient Greek word for assembly. Am I right, Despina? Yes. In ancient times, the agora was the meeting point where the members of democracy congregated to discuss affairs of the state. I am convinced, dear colleagues, that our Parliamentary Assembly should and could be today's agora of Europe, to discuss the fundamental affairs of Europe and its 47 member states, aimed at the benefit of our 830 million citizens. Dear colleagues, in the very first session of this assembly, here in Strasbourg in 1949, Winston Churchill concluded his intervention with his hope that a parliamentary assembly of that new Council of Europe could take, and I quote, a leading and active part in the revival of the greatest of continents which had fallen into the worst of misery, end of quote. Since then, dear colleagues, Europe and the world have profoundly changed. We did overcome many of the misery. We were able to achieve many changes for the better, but many old and new challenges are still there to be met. Again, dear colleagues, we live in dangerous times. Tensions are on the rise, and respect for the rule of law, human rights, and democratic values are going down. Instead of achieving greater unity, there is a real and present danger of new dividing lines in Europe, at the cost of the security of our citizens. Especially now, in dangerous times, Europe is in a dire need of a meeting point, an agora for Europe, for an effective governmental and interparliamentary diplomacy. The Council of Europe and its Assembly offer this unique form of diplomacy, if and when we adapt ourselves to the new circumstances. Therefore, dear colleagues, I invite you all to take active part in the modernization of activities and working methods. We do not have to start from scratch. We already agreed on our main challenges for the future, formulated in the resolution on the role and mission of our Assembly. I call in particular to our vice presidents, as well as the new chairpersons and vice chairs of our committees, who we will elect in a moment, to take the lead in this process of adaptation and modernization, together with the Secretary General of our Assembly and her staff. There is a lot of work to be done in this respect. Dear colleagues, I hope that there will never be a dull moment for us all in the coming period. I promise you that I will do my utmost to give you, colleagues, ample opportunity to act to the best of your abilities. My door will always be open for you and for every one of you to find solutions to whatever problem you think should be solved. Chers collègues, en 1949, 20 millions de personnes en attente se sont réunis ici à Strasbourg, à la place Kléber, à l'occasion de la toute première réunion de notre Assemblée parlementaire. Là, les premiers membres de notre Assemblée ont été chaleureusement accueillis par les citoyens de Strasbourg en tant que représentants de l'espérance après tant d'années de désespoir. Aujourd'hui, chers collègues, il n'y a pas foule à la place Kléber pour nous recevoir. Mais dans toute l'Europe, il y a des millions de personnes dont la vie et les droits fondamentaux sont liés à la question de savoir si, en 2022, nous sommes encore capables de jouer notre rôle moteur et actif dans la création d'une plus grande unité en Europe. Nous ne pourrons pas décevoir nos concitoyens à ce regard. Je compte donc sur votre soutien et votre sagesse. Chers collègues, puis-je terminer en exprimant mon grand respect à tous les membres de notre personnel, nos interprètes, nos techniciens et tous les autres dans tout le Conseil de l'Europe dont le travail rend possible cette semaine de session dans des circonstances très difficiles. Nous leur devons notre profond respect. J'ai des fleurs pour l'expression de mon respect. Ah, merci. Et j'offre les fleurs à Maria et à Despina. Et en honorant vous tous, tout grands gens de consul de l'Europe. Et j'ai un troisième bouquet, et naturellement pour Maria. Maria, où es-tu? L'autre candidat d'aujourd'hui. So, now the prepared text has been set. Now the real work starts. On which page do we start? The President's speech is done. And now we continue. We continue, dear colleagues, with the election of Vice Presidents of our Assembly. 90 nominations for Vice Presidents are listed in document AS/info 2022. 01. If there is no request for a vote, they will be declared elected. There is a request for a vote. Madam Stine.
Can I make a point of order on behalf of the Dutch delegation?
Yes.
I don't know what the protocol is, but and if so, then I'll wait. And otherwise, I'm looking at the Spina. You can stop me now. But if not, then I would really like to bring some flowers to the new president on behalf of the Dutch delegation. Is that possible?
So we continue with the election of the Vice President, and there was a request. There is a point of order. Mr. Daams.
Well, given the type of point of order that I've seen from the Dutch delegation, I'm going to abuse of it, going against the rules. by obviously congratulating you. We'll have enough time to talk about it. But Petra, I was before you, because my president is waiting in your office, Mr. President. Voilà, I just wanted everyone to know that. I didn't think I could bring alcohol into this hemicycle. It's not done. But one of the elements, obviously, in my capacity is that. So I do apologize for breaching the rules at this stage, but I do want to congratulate you and thank the other candidate. And, well, my Belgian little president is waiting for you in your new office, Mr. President. All the best.
It's going to bring to us, now I can say, it's going to bring a lot of presents and flowers. So I'm a happy man. Thank you very much, Rick. And we will have time to talk about the transition of your powers to mine. There has been a request for a vote in respect to which candidature. Would you please explain?
Mr. President and esteemed colleagues, I would like to challenge the nomination of Mr. Petr Tolstoy and call for the vote for the matter. Mr. Tolstoy has demonstrated in a number of public statements during recent years complete disregard for Council of Europe values, disrespect to human rights, democracy, and rule of law. He has threatened democratically elected leaders of another Council of Europe member state and questioned independence and territorial integrity of several Council of Europe member countries. With his rhetoric during the past sessions of PACE, Mr. Tolstoy has violated rules 7, 5.3 and 5.7 of the Code of Conduct for members of the Parliamentary Assembly. I therefore call on all delegates to support me in this challenge and vote against election of Mr. Tolstoy to the post of the Vice President of the Parliamentary Assembly. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now first need to know if this request has the support of at least 20 members or substitutes. Can we check that? I will invite those who support the request for a vote indicate their support by using the available voting system. Members present in the chamber should use the hemicycle voting system. Members participating remotely should vote using the voting remote system. Members who support the request for a vote should vote rest. Members who do not support the request for a vote shall not vote at all. The vote in hemicycle and via remote voting is now open. The vote is closed. Can I ask for the results to be displayed? The vote is carried. This request is therefore valid under Rule 16, and therefore there will be an electronic secret ballot in respect of the candidature of Mr. Tolstoy of the Russian Federation. The ballot will take place by electronic voting on the Skytel platform. I propose that the ballot takes place tomorrow, Tuesday morning. Are there any other requests for a vote on the vice presidents? If not, I declare all other candidates elected as vice presidents of the Assembly. In accordance with Rule 16 of the Rules of Procedure, they will take precedence by age, and I congratulate them on their election. Next item on the agenda is the appointment of members of committees. The candidatures for the general committees of the Assembly have been published as Commissions 2022-01 and Addendum 1. Are these proposals approved? These proposals are approved and the committees are appointed accordingly. Then, before we examine the draft agenda, the agenda needs to consider requests for debates under urgent and current affairs procedures. The Bureau has received the following: a request for debate under urgent procedure on, and I quote the title, Beating COVID-19 with Public Health Measures, end of quote, on behalf of the 5 political groups. And a request for a current affairs debate on current challenges to European security. What role for the Council of Europe? Also requested by the 5 political groups. I can advise you that the Bureau was in favor, I can tell you that the Bureau was in favor of holding both requests. We first will consider requests for the debates on the urgent procedure. The Assembly needs to consider the request submitted by the 5 political groups for a debate on the urgent procedure on beating COVID-19 with public health measures. At its meeting on Friday, the Bureau approved this request and therefore recommends to the Assembly that the matter be debated during this part session as the first item on Thursday morning. Does the Assembly agree with this recommendation? I do not see no objection, so the Bureau's recommendation is accepted and the request for urgent procedure is therefore approved. Then we have the request for for the current. Now we come to the consideration of the current affairs request. Under the title, Current Challenges to European Security, What Role for the Council of Europe, from the 5 political groups. At its meeting of Friday, the Bureau approved this request and therefore recommends the Assembly that the matter be debated during this part session. Does the Assembly agree with this recommendation? I see no opposition. The Bureau recommendation is therefore accepted and the request for a current affairs debate is therefore approved. The debate will take place on Thursday morning as the last item of business and will be opened by Mr. Zalt Nemeth. Dear colleagues, the next item of business is the adoption of the agenda for this first part session of 2022, which you find in document 15408, provisional 3. The draft agenda submitted for the Assembly's approval was drawn up by the Bureau on 21st of January and updated this morning. There were 2 successful challenges to the credentials of the Russian Federation, and the reports on these will be debated at the start of the afternoon sitting on Wednesday. The deadline for amendments to the report on the challenge on substantive grounds on Rule 8 will be 8 o'clock on Tuesday in the evening. The deadline for amendments to the report on the challenge on procedural grounds under Rule 7 will be 10:30 in the morning of Wednesday. Does the Assembly agree with the agenda as we have discussed, including the urgent debate, the current affairs debate, and the debate on the report on the challenge of the credentials? This is not a question time, so do you have a point of order?
Okay, point of order, okay. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Tell me, please, the Russian credentials will be discussed before report on Navalny poisoning or after? Thank you.
Yes?
Before or after?
Before.
Why?
This is the proposal on the agenda, and if you
I have another proposal to make it after.
then you object the
I object.
agenda. Okay. Do we have
If there is an objection, remember, you go here. He has the floor.
Yeah. So you have the floor for 1 minute, Mr. Goncharenko.
Thank you very much. I feel that we need to discuss the very important question of credentials of Russian delegation after the report about Mr. Navalny case, because this is absolutely 2 connected issues. When we are speaking about Putin killing his own oppositioners, we need to understand also what is the position of our colleagues from the Russian parliament. And also, certainly these questions are connected. So my proposition is, First, Jacques Mer's report on Alexei Navalny case. And after this, after all, we will hear and then we will approve. Then we have a possibility to discuss the credentials of Russian delegation, because certainly we understand that one more violation of core principles of the Council of Europe, which we see in the Navalny case, can influence the voting on the credentials of Russian Federation. So that is my proposition. First Navalny case, then credentials. Thank you.
We now heard the moving of the motion to alter the draft agenda. The only members who can now be heard are the mover of the motion. We just heard them. One speaker against the motion and the spokesperson of the committee of the monitoring committee. Who is going to speak against the proposal? Mr. Omtzigt, you have the floor.
Sorry.
It's functioning.
It's working. Thanks. I supported the challenging of the Russian credentials, both on substantive grounds and on procedural grounds. And I really think there are big issues with the Russian delegation, so they should be examined. So let there be no mistake. But first, you check those credentials before you're going to discuss on Russia. If this were to happen on your country, if we're going to challenge your credentials and then discuss a report on your country, you would be angry. And I think we should stay tough but fair on all countries. And fairness is you first discuss whether you want to give them the credentials, and if you want to give them credentials, they can participate, and if not, not. But don't give the semblance of having a procedural grounds of not having them participate in a discussion in which they have a legitimate interest to participate.
Thank you very much. Our rules say that now a spokesperson on behalf of the monitoring committee could comment on the proposal. Do we have Mr. Fassino with us at this moment, here or online?
Otherwise, we proceed with vote.
As I do not see representatives of the Bureau of the Monitoring Committee at this stage, so we do not have an opinion of the Monitoring Committee, so we proceed with the vote on the alteration of the agenda moved by Mr. Goncharenko. Those who support the proposal should vote yes, and those who reject the proposal and approve the draft agenda should vote no. So if you support the proposal of Mr. Goncharenko to alter the agenda, vote yes. If you stick to the approved agenda, you should vote no. I hope that that is clear. Members in the chamber should use the hemicycle voting system. Members participating remotely should vote using the remote system. The vote in the hemicycle and via remote voting is now open. How's the vote going?
Okay, you can close it.
I close the vote. Ask for the result to be displayed. The proposed change of the agenda is disapproved. Is the draft agenda now agreed to? I think so. It is agreed to. We will proceed according to the agenda as we now adopted. Next point on the agenda is the minutes of the meeting of the Standing Committee in Rome on the 25th and 26th of November, which have been distributed in document AS/per 2020 PV03. I invite the Assembly to take note of the minutes. That is done. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. This was my first presiding of our Assembly. We will now hold our next public sitting this afternoon at 3:30 with the agenda which was now approved in the morning. The sitting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
So we see each other
This afternoon.